My name is Christine Zekas, but I go by Teen Zekas, which also happens to be my handle for Twitter and Instagram. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a software engineer and an imposter. Today, we're going to be talking about where the term the imposter syndrome originated, warning signs that you might be experiencing imposter syndrome, and most importantly, how to fight it off. Oh, and I used to be a teacher, so you better believe there's going to be homework as well. Let's start with a definition. What is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is a thought process in which a person diminishes their own accomplishments, often attributing their successes to luck. This is then coupled with a fear of being discovered as a fraud or less capable than they appear to be. What we now call imposter syndrome was originally coined as the imposter phenomenon by two psychologists, Dr. Pauline Rose Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes. In 1978, they conducted a study on and coined the term the imposter phenomenon amongst high-achieving women. Incidentally, they're both still practicing in Atlanta, helping people cope with imposter syndrome, among other things. Clance and Imes studied 150 successful women for 5 years. They defined highly successful women as PhDs in various specialties, respected professionals in their fields, and students with high honors at prestigious institutions. All of these women shared in common a lack of an internal sense of success. Many believed their accomplishments were a result of luck, and in some cases, they even believed that they got into an excellent school or got a great job as a result of some clerical error. The study noted some clinical symptoms that commonly accompany the imposter phenomenon: generalized anxiety, lack of self-confidence, depression, and frustration caused by not being able to meet one's own impossibly high standards. Clance and Imes highlighted 4 contributing factors to the phenomenon. They first outlined 2 common family dynamics that subjects experienced as children. The first was being considered sensitive or charming as compared to an intelligent sibling. These children tended to work hard to prove themselves, but their families remained comparatively unimpressed. They constantly battled between seeking validation and fear that their families were right all along. On the other hand, other subjects experienced the problem of being considered perfect or effortlessly talented. These children were often told that they had innate abilities that allowed perfection to come easily to them. So any difficulties they encountered seemed to be evidence that they were actually none of what they had been propped up to be. The researchers also laid out some societal factors that could contribute to the imposter phenomenon. First, they cited research claiming that women are more likely than men to have low expectations for success in various tasks. Our expectations color our perception of our experiences. When a person experiences unexpected success, they're more likely to attribute that success to an external temporary cause, such as luck. In contrast, a person who expects to succeed will likely associate that success with an internal stable cause, such as ability. Additionally, researchers at the time pointed to low expectations of women by society at large. So all of these factors converge and lead to what we now refer to as imposter syndrome. Clance and Imes also recommended several therapies for their clients in the study. One is group therapy with other high achievers, all experiencing the imposter phenomenon. First, this allows clients to see that they're not alone. It also may be easier to recognize the intelligence and talent in another person, and then to see the disconnect between reality and that person's self-perceptions. Another suggested therapy is to work on interrupting ritualistic behaviors. For example, when studying for a test, try thinking, I will do well on this exam, instead of I may fail. When our success is not consistently preceded by self-doubt, we can break that pattern of predicting failure. The next recommendation is to think of the people you believe you have fooled, then imagine confessing to them how you conned them. Next, imagine out loud how each person would respond to the news. The authors gave a few examples. I did not give you an award in English because you charmed me. I did like you as a person, but I honored you for your outstanding work. I'm angry that you think I'm so stupid that I can't judge competence when I see it. I don't like your negating me and my opinions. Another recommended therapy is to keep a record of positive feedback. It's important to note also how we deflect this feedback. Eventually, the work is to take in and accept positive feedback. The authors also suggest a role-playing exercise in which clients act out the opposite of their negative thoughts about themselves. They are to take on a persona who is intelligent, talented, and accomplished, expressing these things out loud. Clance and Imes found that those most resistant to this exercise usually had the most to gain from it. They also noted that it can be especially helpful to do in a group therapy session where the audience is responding positively to the self-affirmation. Finally, Clance and Imes encouraged clients to try being themselves more often. The hope is to disrupt the behavior of doing or saying things we don't want to for the sole purpose of gaining approval from others. Clients are often surprised and encouraged when the catastrophic consequences they imagined never come. Additionally, they're more inclined to accept compliments as authentic when they're being their genuine selves. Of course, there were several limitations to the study as well. The authors noted that more study on men is needed. They found that men experienced the imposter phenomenon less frequently and less intensely than women. Speaking of which, there's also a large focus on the gender binary in the study. It discusses women in contrast to men and acknowledges no other genders. It's also important to note that this study comes from a white perspective. Both researchers and nearly all participants were white. In the 1970s, there was a movement to study gender in psychology and a movement to study race in psychology. But it wasn't until 1989 that the concept of intersectionality, the compounded effects of having multiple marginalized identities, came into the scene. The term was coined by Kimberly Williams Crenshaw. We also know that imposter syndrome can affect people from all kinds of marginalized groups, be they Black, Latina, Muslim, trans, non-binary, queer, neurodivergent, or disabled. And of course, regardless of frequency or intensity, we know that white men with none of these marginalized identities can experience imposter syndrome as well. Before we dig into how to fight off imposter syndrome, I think it's worthwhile to take a moment to normalize the experience. It's not just you. In the name of normalization, I'll tell you a quick story about my own recent experience with imposter syndrome. A couple of years ago, when I decided I wanted to start speaking at conferences like this one, I read somewhere that you need to apply to 10 conferences to get accepted to one. Of course, I assumed my conference acceptance rate would be less than what I had read. So I applied to 40, hoping to get 2. But instead of having half the rate I had read about, my acceptance rate was double. In fact, I had to turn down some conferences in order to speak at others. And so thanks to my imposter syndrome, I ended up overbooked and exhausted. I've since started only applying to as many conferences as I'm willing to actually attend. Beyond my own personal story, imposter syndrome affects all levels, people at all levels of their career. CEOs are just as likely to experience imposter syndrome as individual contributors. It's important to remember that experiencing imposter syndrome is not an indication that a person is untalented or undeserving of their successes. In fact, there are lots of notable, talented, and widely lauded people who have described their own imposter syndrome publicly. Here are some quotes from a few of them. "I still doubt myself every single day. What people believe is my self-confidence is actually my reaction to fear." This quote comes from actor, rapper, and producer Will Smith. "I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're gonna find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're gonna find me out." This from the incomparable author and Nobel laureate Maya Angelou. It never goes away. It's sort of like, you're actually listening to me? It doesn't go away, that feeling of, I don't know if the world should take me seriously. I'm just that little girl on the South Side who went to public school. This one is from the attorney, author, and former First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama. Now that you know you're not alone, let's get into something a bit more practical. How can we recognize imposter syndrome when it starts to sneak up on us? Here are some warning signs that you might be experiencing imposter syndrome. You have difficulty accepting praise. Lots of people feel weird getting compliments, but imposters have trouble even recognizing praise as valid. You're an overworker. Perhaps you keep working on a project until it is well beyond the level that an average person would deem acceptable. You feel the need to be the best. Many imposters were high achievers as children, and as adults feel compelled to compete when they get into new situations and surround themselves with other smart, talented people. You're described as a perfectionist. We imposters often hold ourselves to an impossible standard of perfection. Anything short of this is considered a failure. The fear of failure can paralyze you. Have you ever opted not to do something in order to avoid the possibility of failing? You avoid showing confidence. This one is more common among people from marginalized genders. This avoidance can come from a fear of appearing to overcompensate or from a fear of not being able to measure up to expectations. You actually dread success. Not feeling worthy of success can lead us to feelings of guilt when we are acknowledged or rewarded for it. You compare your struggles and obstacles to those of others. Everyone compares themselves to others, but imposters constantly tell themselves that everyone is getting by with fewer struggles in life than they are. You associate praise with charm over actual talent. Because people with imposter syndrome are typically highly intelligent and good at interacting with others, people often find them charming. It's then easy to associate any praise from supervisors or other authority figures as a result of that charm, rather than our intellect, talent, or hard work. You focus more on what you haven't done. Going back to that impossible standard of perfection, it's often difficult for us to meet our goals or milestones according to our own expectations. So instead of focusing on our many accomplishments, we tend to dwell on what we haven't done or what we haven't done well enough. You're convinced you aren't enough. This last one tends to cut pretty deep. This is about that overwhelming feeling of being a fraud. The fear that one day everyone will realize you're not everything they thought you were. It's the feeling that you are less qualified than your peers, or that you somehow lucked into where you are today. I read a book a while back by Sarah Cooper called How to Be Successful Without Hurting Men's Feelings: Non-Threatening Leadership Strategies for Women. Cooper includes a quiz about imposter syndrome. Like the rest of the book, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's quick, and I thought it might be valuable for us to carry out our own assessment. It's only a few questions, and you'll want to keep a running tally of your points. You may want to write them down or type them in your notes, but it will be possible to do in your head if you prefer. Consider whether any of the following statements apply to you. I don't deserve my success. If you answered yes to this, give yourself 2 points. What success? I've done nothing with my life. If you said yes to this, give yourself 4 points. When someone criticizes me, I know they're right. 2 points. When someone compliments me, I punch them in the neck. 8 points. I am equally afraid to fail and afraid to succeed. 4 points. I see all opportunities as a trap. 6 points. Anything I accomplish is 90% luck and 10% luck. 8 points. Okay, that's all of the questions. Take a moment to tally up your final score. And before we move on to the results, if you want to type in your score into the chat, we can all commiserate. If you scored 30 points or higher, I'd tell you how great your imposter syndrome is, but I don't want you to punch me. If you scored between 20 and 29 points, your imposter syndrome is okay. Not great, just okay, which is perfect, really. And if you scored 19 points or fewer, you really need to work on your imposter syndrome. You believe in yourself too much. I imagine that most of you are attending this talk because you have experienced some amount of imposter syndrome in your life. So what now? It's time for our fight scene. Let's talk about how to slay the beast of imposter syndrome. We're going to cover various tools you can use, so hopefully you'll have a few powerful weapons in your arsenal to reach for whenever you need them. First, track your accomplishments and external praise. When tracking your accomplishments, focus on what you did, not just the outcome. For example, we don't want to simply say, I got the job. Our imposter syndrome can easily turn this into, I somehow tricked them into giving me the job, or I must have been lucky. Instead, I would log something like this. I successfully completed the code challenge. In the in-person interview, I answered questions thoughtfully and thoroughly. I nailed the data modeling whiteboard exercise. Don't forget to review these once in a while. I started logging my accomplishments a while ago, and at some point realized that I was never taking the time to look back on them. It might be helpful to set up a weekly reminder or develop some other system to regularly review the awesome things you've done. There are other great benefits to logging your accomplishments as well. They can be a helpful guide when it comes time to advocate for a promotion or a raise. It's also very handy when you need to update your resume or portfolio. You might find a few points that you completely forgot about, but you decide you want to highlight on your resume. Now let's talk about tracking external praise. Take note of every compliment or positive feedback you receive. Be sure to include the source of the feedback. Consider also jotting down how you felt about the compliment. Did you believe it? Did it make you uncomfortable to hear? It might be easier to identify your behavior. How did you respond to the compliment? Did you accept it? Did you contradict it? Once in a while, review this log and see what trends you notice. Perhaps there are certain areas about which you consistently receive positive feedback. Also look at trends in your responses. As you track the experience of getting this kind of feedback, you can start to be intentional about how you respond to it and disrupt your instinct to contradict or disregard positive feedback. Next, catalog your skills. It can be a helpful exercise to list out your skills, the assets you bring to your current role or to the role you're going for next. Sometimes it helps to think about your past experiences as a guide here. How were you able to be successful in previous roles or in school? Maybe you're good at studying new concepts, or you've worked in customer service and have developed excellent communication skills. Maybe you're a musician and you're good at pattern recognition, or you've done work with creative problem solving. Or maybe your previous work has helped you master the art of persuasion. These kinds of transferable skills make you an asset to any team. Then be sure to stress these skills in your interviews and try to hold them in your mind as you go about your day-to-day. You are an asset to your team and to your company. This applies even if you're brand new to the industry or to your role. Being new is an asset in and of itself. You're a fresh pair of eyes on the code. You can ask the questions no one else has because, well, that's just how we've always done things. This next one's my favorite. Assemble your hype squad. Okay, so what is a hype squad? A hype squad is a group of people who are in your corner helping to support you. They listen when you need to vent. They build you up when you need confidence in yourself. They push you when you need encouragement. Don't worry if you don't yet have this group of friends. Try to network at meetups, conferences, and other events. I bet there's someone right here at AfroTech World who would love to grab a virtual coffee and start to learn about how awesome you are so they can remind you about it later. Next, build up others. Obviously, it will be your job to help out the other members of your squad. But let's go beyond that for a moment. There's great value in becoming a mentor to others. When you talk to someone who is somewhere along the path you've already traveled, you'll learn that you know a lot more than you thought you did. You'll also start to see how valuable your experiences are to someone else and how far you've actually come on your journey. And remember that for all of us, it's important to continue to normalize imposter syndrome. For someone who may be struggling with their own imposter syndrome, you can help by reminding them that they're not alone. Speaking of mentors, I'd like to take a moment to tell you all about a man named Jeff Smith. He was the head of Prod Ops at my last job, and he's one of those people who seem to be the go-to person for literally everything. Though he also seems to trust his team and give them a ton of autonomy as well. He's an awesome, engaging speaker. He's a published author. Not only do I look up to him, but as one of the only other Black people in the tech department, he was always there for me when I needed to talk about something awful in the news, like the state-sanctioned murder of a Black man by police. He reminded me that it's okay to call in Black once in a while if I have to. I think of Jeff as someone who's made it. So the day I heard him casually refer to his own imposter syndrome, I was floored. If he deals with imposter syndrome, then maybe I'm not as unimpressive as I think I am. Finally, you can embrace your imposter syndrome. This is one of the best tweets I've read on the subject. Embrace imposter syndrome. Revel in the fact you have fooled everyone. You are a trickster goddess. You are the imposter child for deception and clever ruses. I'm sure that many of you have heard the old adage to fake it till you make it. Well, for those of us with imposter syndrome, there may not be a clear concept of what making it looks like. So let's be really good at faking it. It's important to understand that no one really knows what they're doing. Don't let the people with an unearned sense of confidence fool you into thinking they know more than you do. They just know how to look good, and so do you. So to recap, in order to fight off imposter syndrome, you can track your accomplishments and external praise, catalog your skills, assemble your hype squad, build up others, and embrace your imposter syndrome. So what's next? It's time for our call to action. Now, I warned you earlier that I was a teacher before going into tech, so you know I'm going to give you all some homework. I want you to think about what you're going to do differently starting on Monday. If you've decided to start logging your accomplishments, external praise, or skills, go ahead and create that document. Maybe it's an Excel sheet or a Google Doc. Just figure out where you're going to keep track and make it happen. Reach out to someone you think should be on your hype squad. Ask to grab coffee or lunch and catch up. Remind yourself of how good you are at coming across as capable and qualified. You are an example of what Black excellence is all about. Try to remind yourself of that every day. Remind yourself of your unique skills. What do you have that no one else on your team does? Try to view yourself through the eyes of your hype squad, or through the eyes of the people who hired you after your awesome interview, or who promoted you after you kicked butt at your job all year. It's possible they see something in you that you don't. Try to see it. And finally, practice the art of confidence. They say that just by smiling or laughing, you can make yourself start to feel happy. So why not start acting confident? Speak up in your next meeting. Raise your hand for that challenging task you want and say no to the administrative task you don't. Walk into your next interview or daily stand-up like you own the room. And if you're worried that won't come naturally, I find it's best to take it at a bit of a strut. Well, that's it from me. I want to thank AfroTech World for having me. And of course, a big thank you to you all for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.